Welcome back to our third episode of the Engage Nation podcast, our special edition series in line with the Women's World Cup. Today we have Elsa Mangan joining us. She's the Women and Girls Project Manager at Football Victoria, and she's also a PhD candidate focusing on Football Australia's Legacy 23 plan and the outcomes post-Women's World Cup. So thanks for coming on, Elsa.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Like we were chatting before, it's my first podcast, so really excited to be here.
Starting well. So we always like to start with a little bit of an intro about yourself and what you do. So we'll probably start with your role at Football Vic first. So a little bit of an outline of, what you do there and what are your key goals.
I wear a number of different hats in football, but one of my main ones is as Women and Girls Project Manager at Football Victoria. And I've been there for about 2.5 years now, and it's been, an awesome experience being able to work in the sport that I'm so passionate about. And, I guess a lot of the work that we do in the Women and Girls department is around building participation for women and girls across all avenues of football, including playing, coaching, refereeing, administration, just really, working with the clubs across Victoria to ensure the environments are really, suited to work towards that goal.
Awesome. What led you to joining Football V and especially within the women's sort of area of the organisation?
I think as we spoke a week or so ago, I grew up playing soccer I grew up in northern New South Wales in a little area just outside of Lismore, and started playing football when I was 7 or 8 years old. Just fell in love with the sport like a lot of us do, and continued playing up until now at 28. And was just obsessed, loved soccer and everything about it. And after school, I fell into the field of health promotion, having done that at uni and worked in that for maybe 4 or 5 years. And I love the concept of health promotion, being preventative health, and working towards, positive change in the community. But I was really missing, an opportunity came up to work at Football Victoria on a program called Go Soccer Mums, which is funded by Vic Health. So it kind of, combined my two loves of football and health promotion in one, in terms of getting more women more active across Victoria through soccer. So, that's how I kind of fell into it.
Yeah, awesome. And then I know a little bit, because like I said, we had a chat last week, but I know a little bit about your PhD.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also doing that, which is an incredibly massive undertaking. Not many people do them, as everyone knows, and they are long and they can be tedious. But just give us a little background about what your PhD, what it is, what you're focusing on, what you're researching.
The opportunity came up to take up a PhD at Vic Uni based on, as a lot of us know, we're hosting the Women's World Cup here in Australia and New Zealand. And, to look at the legacy of that, considering there's been a lot of work around it. So really looking at the legacy of hosting it here in Australia and New Zealand in terms of the experience of women and girls at grassroots level. So, we're working on that over the next sort of 2-3 years, and it's been a dream so far. It's awesome.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so we're going to sort of go back to your work, I think, a little bit at Football Vic, because as we mentioned, they sort of quite nicely flow into one another. But through your work at Football Victoria and working in the women's game, what have you seen at a grassroots level in terms of participation, in terms of equitable access, all of the big topics that are part of the legacy plan that we'll touch on in a moment's time?
I guess I'll start going back to where I sort of grew up playing soccer as well. Obviously, it's not in Victoria, but it wasn't until I really got the job, or in the sort of the months leading into getting the job, that I realised how privileged I was to have, the opportunity to even think of wanting to play in the first place, let alone being able to play, and just having had such a positive experience that's enabled me to continue playing up until now. And I thought, I just thought that was the norm. Like, I didn't realise that so many people, including women and girls and many other vulnerable groups, never even get that opportunity to be in an environment where they think, I'd like to play that, or I can play that. Can I play that? I guess that's sort of, I forgot the question. That's it.
No, it was just, it was about what your role at Football Victoria has shown you in terms of grassroots level. But also, I will actually ask, did when you were growing up, did your club, were you playing in a mixed team, or did you just have, was there a women's team, like a standalone women's team as part of your club actually?
Yeah, where I played, so I played in a town called Casino, which is quite a small town. I don't know what the population is. It's probably, I guess maybe like 15, 20,000, if that. Anyway, but I started playing in a mixed team because there weren't enough girls playing to have girls competitions, I guess. And that was sort of just like your club-based, I guess like what Mini Roos is down here now, like your club-based games. You just rock up and play with your team. And then I think when it was sort of verging on to I think they started their girls-only teams from under 12s. And then it was like, every second age group it would go up. So you'd, be 12s, 14s, 16s at that club. And I actually did quite well for a small town in terms of filling those teams. And then so I just continued, I guess, along that sort of trajectory and playing women's and going on there. So, But in terms of, I guess.
I would assume, I was just going to say, I would assume as, like it's very much an assumption between metro and regional, but for regional, and I'm sure you could probably, with your experience, explains a little bit more. But with regional, you would sort of have mixed, or you wouldn't really get a standalone women's team. And we both attended, obviously, the panel earlier this week with some former Matildas and a current young Matilda, where they talked about how she was the only girl in her soccer club when she was growing up. Like she played mixed and that was it. Like she didn't have the women's standalone team.
And it's really interesting. It reminds me every time it comes up, and like a lot of our Matildas today grew up playing with the boys, or they didn't have the opportunity to play with the girls. But I've also seen in regional and metro areas and through coaching as well, there's a I don't know, and like, they could probably attribute that to some of their success in terms of having to be tougher and resilient and working towards where they are today. But what I want to see, because I see time and time again that in terms of, I guess, the high performance of becoming a technically better player, that you have to play with the boys to be better. Like if you want to get anywhere, you have to play with the boys. But I guess what I would love to see is that you don't have to do that, that, eventually that you can play in a girls' competition, in a girls' team, and still be as good as you could be playing in a boys' competition. That's something I've always sort of thought about as well, having, I guess, my experience only once or twice having had to play with the boys. And being where I'm not a Matilda by any means, but having been happy with my experience as a player. It's just something that I've always thought it's interesting and something I think about in terms of where I would love to see the women's game head in terms of that aspect of it.
Yeah. And so then what else have you seen from Football Vic at the grassroots level in terms of, equitable access and opportunities for women in the game?
So I don't think I mentioned earlier, but Football Victoria, we have a women and girls action plan that is underpinned by the goal of working towards 50-50 gender equity by 2027. And there's a number of pillars that fit under it that we work around. But what I've seen is there's a lot of support for it, which is awesome to see across all levels. But there is also with that there is a bit of resistance as well, or even just like, I guess, a lack of understanding in terms of, they're supportive, but once they realise what is involved to work towards that, it's kind of like, it might turn into a resistance. So it has been really positive, but also in some ways challenging as well. With quite an ambitious target by 2027. But the key things that come up in terms of, I guess, equitable access is the big one that I've seen as well, and I think will have a place in my PhD, is space and facilities. And that being, based around the term, there's only so many fields in Victoria, for example, or in Melbourne, for example. And a club might sort of go, that sounds great. We want 50-50 gender equity. But once they realise, there's only X amount of space, they'll have to give some of that up for the men and boys. That's where the challenge sort of comes up, that they, what are you willing to give up in order to work towards that? And that's, something that has been coming up time and time again, whether it be, space or coach allocation or funding or whatever it is. It's that, I guess, concept around, needing to give something up in order to enable that to happen. So I guess that's sort of an overarching theme that I've seen in, the 2.5 years that I've been at Football Vic, and through a number of the programs that we run around that. But I guess that's sort of, I guess, on a really broad level what I've noticed.
Yeah. And then has the World Cup coming along, and obviously being here and being in Australia, has that actually changed things a little bit? Are the people more open to it? how has that shifted a little bit? Has it shifted at all?
Yeah, I think definitely within just my everyday life and like the circles I run in and friends and sporting groups, there is like, as you know, like a huge buzz at the moment. Like it's a really exciting time, and it seems very even just on like social media and Instagram and like fashion brands getting in on it and Vogue, and like it's very on trend and like cool at the moment. Like women's sport in general, but especially women's soccer and women's football and the World Cup. So yeah, there's this huge buzz about it and huge, I guess, anticipation for, that it is going to boom post the World Cup in terms of participation and coaching, refereeing, everything. So that's sort of, I guess, like the general sort of sense that I'm guessing or getting, I guess, in the community. So yeah.
Well, you segued really well into talking about your PhD because, as I know, because we talked about it a little bit, your PhD, you focus a lot on the post World Cup and what that will look like and whether we're going to have any meaningful change.
Yeah.
I would love, I know I can talk about it, but obviously you're researching it a little bit. So I'd actually love if you could give us a little bit of a background on, first off, the Legacy 23 plan and what it is, what it stands for, what their aims are.
Yeah.
And then we can go into, what your research is and what you're focusing on with that plan.
For sure. So, for those who don't know, they're Football Australia and FIFA, they always have a legacy around the Women's World Cup, like the Olympics, as part of their bidding process with whichever nation hosts it. They have to sort of, plan somewhat around legacy and what hosting it in your nation will leave for your nation and population. So, from what I've seen, I guess through having started the process in my work at Football Victoria, it looks like a lot of work has gone into the planning and everything around legacy for the Women's World Cup here. And so Football Australia have developed a Legacy 2023 plan. And it's underpinned by 5 pillars. So the first, which is what I'm really interested in, is participation. Then you've got your facilities, leadership and development, tourism and international engagement, and high performance. So, it's quite a holistic, comprehensive plan. And I think I read somewhere that it's the first time they've had a committed legacy working group from FIFA as well in order to have that happen. And, I've seen a lot of the work that Football Australia have sort of been putting, in process in the lead up to during the World Cup as well, which is really good to see, because I guess through a bit of reading you see sometimes that legacy is often an afterthought or it's during the tournament and then it's too late. If you haven't thought about it, in your bidding process, it's not worthwhile and it probably won't have an impact. So I'm really excited to see what comes from it.
Yeah, or even then legacy is something that they do plan for and then they don't enact it.
Yes.
Like it's such an interesting thing. I think I've heard a lot of Sarah Walsh, who's obviously one of the key faces behind the legacy plan.
Yeah.
She talks a lot about how having a plan is wonderful, and we've got a tournament, which is wonderful, but it's a whole other thing to really enact some meaningful change after it.
Exactly.
Because once, like, everyone's focusing on it at the moment because it's all we can talk about and it's all everywhere and it's awesome.
Yeah.
But how do you actually capitalize on that to really push meaningful change is a whole different ballgame and requires a whole different set of skills.
Exactly. Yeah. So, exactly right. Like in terms of, I guess, some of the reading I've done in literature reviews and that side of things as well, it's quite often that the Olympics, Commonwealth Games and other, mega or major sporting events, there might be a legacy plan or maybe not, but there's a lot of, I guess, speculation and anticipation, especially in terms of participation, this huge boom and everything's going to be amazing and everyone's going to be playing sport. More often than not, it's sort of been saying that it doesn't have that impact. So I think, the pressure would definitely be on in terms of really trying to, I guess, leverage and capitalize on hosting the World Cup here and using it as I've seen it often quite referred to as a springboard for achieving all these aims and objectives that we've got out there. So, yeah.
I think I was looking, so they've released obviously the pre-tournament report, which is a little bit of a precursor into where we're at. And I was looking in the pre-tournament report, there's been a 10% increase in participation since the Men's World Cup of Qatar, which is quite low. I would have expected it to be more, but also it might be, look, in all honesty, I don't know how much the Men's World Cup is going to boost female participation in the sport.
Yeah.
Or anything like that. But the other thing which I found really interesting is that currently only 41% of community football facilities are considered inclusive to women and girls.
Mm-hmm.
And their aim is obviously 100%. But that is pre-tournament. And obviously there's going to be a big boom. Well, we're hoping there's going to be a big boom afterwards. So it's just going to be interesting to see that there's going to be more women and girls wanting to play. But most likely we're going to round it closest to the closest, which is, my maths is bad, but like 3 out of 5? Yeah, 3 out of 5 will want to play, but they most likely will come across inadequate facilities for them.
Yeah, which is, I guess, in terms of my PhD, something that I'm really keen at looking at in terms of the environment as a whole at the clubs, that these, potentially new participants or returning participants or current participants will be going into. Because, I guess that's a big thing. If this anticipated boom in numbers does happen and the environments are not, conducive to participation, enjoyment, like comfort, they're not going to stay. So that's, that's really key in terms of trying to retain these new participants that come in. So, and female-friendly facilities being one of them for sure.
And then you touched on it just then, but what is your PhD? What are you focusing on? What's like you mentioned, you're sort of talking about participation. What are you looking at?
Yeah, so we're looking at the lived experiences of women and girls and those who are involved in women and girls football at club level across Victoria. So what I'm doing is I'm collecting that at the moment, sort of like a baseline point as to, what has their experience at their club been like in the past and what is it like right now. And then I'm doing 5 different focus groups across 5 different clubs, and each of those clubs are all a little bit different, just to get, I guess, a good range of experiences and expectations around what the World Cup might bring. So we're looking at a female-only club, a junior-only club, an NPL club, a community club, and a regional club. So, we'll hopefully get quite a good spread of different experiences and different perspectives. And then, looking to touch base with these groups again, sort of 6 months down the track and then a year down the track as well to sort of see, what has changed, 6 months after the Women's World Cup, and then what has changed, or what has been sustained, I guess, in terms of it being a year later. I would love to go, 3 years, 5 years later as well. But unfortunately the PhD only goes for 3 years. So
you can do another article in a couple of years time.
Yeah. If anyone wants to fund it. So that's sort of, I guess, what I'll be working on over the 3 years in terms of, just sort of sitting down, listening to different experiences from different people around, what it's like, what's been like, what's changed, what's been sustained in terms of their club and the environment that they're within.
And I know that you're in the preliminary research of it at the moment, but what are you seeing already from this sort of, this mix of clubs?
Yeah, so I've conducted a small number of focus groups so far, and even the process has just been so nice, and every group is so different. Like they're all within, Victoria, but it just really depends. So I guess a common thing that is coming up is what I spoke about earlier is that space factor in terms of, I guess, the club in general and wanting to grow in terms of the game in general, but particularly in terms of women and girls as well. And then it's also been really interesting in terms of, I guess, over the years, people's reflections on those facilities and how some of them have been at clubs where they've had new facilities built and it's been a really nice sort of change and just, I guess, in terms of value as well, whether it be as a player or a coach or as a referee. It's I guess that's sort of something that's coming up as well.
And in terms of facilities and access at the moment, what are the clubs looking like pre-tournament? Do they have any plan? And then those who maybe are missing the mark a little bit, do they have any plans, or are they a little bit resistant to change? Because we talked obviously a little bit earlier about the fact there's sort of 2 levels to it, right? You've got the people who are you've got to get them on board, and then you've got to get the actual change enacted.
Yeah.
And that's 2 separate barriers effectively. What is it looking like in terms of those 2 barriers and the groups that you've you've selected for the research?
Yeah. So I think from memory, it's been some of the clubs have got, I guess, as to their experience, like below par facilities or space, and then some have just had like new ones built. So I guess, really being able to see the contrast there in terms of the experiences around those. But something that comes up, I think, and through my work at Football Victoria as well, is that that local government or council piece as well. Often it's working with them in terms of, what funding's available, what space is available if they're working with councils in terms of like what fields they're going to play on and that sort of thing. Sometimes, the club is really open. Like every club wants, spick and stand facilities that are female friendly. But at the end of the day, if the funding's not there or if the money's not there, it's really quite challenging. So that's definitely a key piece that comes in terms of that sort of hard, tangible sort of stuff. But
And then I just find it incredibly interesting when you brought it up as well, is the female-only club. So do you have a little bit about just how, why, what came into, like, why did they start? Where are they based as well?
Yeah.
Are they metro or regional?
They are, metro. And there actually are a number, through my knowledge through Football Victoria, there's a number of female-only clubs, which is really cool to see. So I probably couldn't speak on behalf of the clubs in terms of why they came about and that side of things. But from my knowledge and I guess connections at Football Victoria, they all do an amazing job and are really passionate about creating those safe spaces for women and girls to get into the game, but also thrive in the game as well.
It's incredible because probably 10 years ago you wouldn't have even thought of it. About it. And it's amazing to see how far we've come.
Yeah, exactly. Well. In a number of sports too. Like you see it in like footy and cricket. Like it's really cool to see.
There's been a lot of change between having the mixed team. I mean, you go from Tal, who we obviously spoke about a bit earlier at the panel on Monday, where she was the only girl in her club surrounded by boys. Then you get the mixed teams, then you get the standalone teams, and now we're at the point as well where we're getting standalone clubs, which is incredible.
Really cool. And I guess that's something I'm really interested in as well. And I think when, like we spoke about last week in terms of legacy and the many different kinds of legacies, something I'm really interested in is the social legacy of the Women's World Cup in terms of those experiences and, just how women and girls are even sort of, I guess, perceived at clubs and how their experiences are shaped by that. And I think that would be something really interesting as well in terms of being at a female-only club, in terms of the, respect and recognition that you might not receive as, commonly at a multi-gender club.
And then how did your work at Football Victoria sort of lean into you starting your PhD?
Obviously being quite passionate about women and girls football and having had a background in health promotion and being really interested in positive change, I actually did an honours year through Curtin Uni back in 2016. And whilst it was an absolute slog, it was so hard. I think because it wasn't something that I wasn't, I guess, passionate about it, like I am passionate about my PhD. And it was on how parents and caregivers use their mobile phones in playground settings. And, which, I mean, it was a great experience and I learned a lot. And, I guess I did, upon reflection a few years after I sort of recovered from the trauma, I guess I really enjoyed the process of research. And, that combined with being, I guess, really interested in what you're researching, it's kind of, it's a dream. So how it came about was we did our exec, Karen Pearce, who's amazing. She organised for some professional development with Lee Russell. I think it was her workshop series, which was really, really beneficial for all the women and girls at Football Victoria back in 21. And Karen and I had a discussion, I guess, off the back of that around, what is it that I want to do and where I want to go. And then sort of, I guess the idea of a PhD has always been floating around in the back of my head. But the right time and place or topic has never sort of really come to fruition at the right time. And then it was probably maybe like not even a month later, I was on leave. I was on the Gold Coast visiting family and I had a few missed calls from Karen and I was like, it must be important. She knows I'm on leave. So I gave her a call back and she it was like, you will not believe this. She was talking to a colleague, my supervisor at the time actually, that he was mentioned a PhD position has come up, and it's on, because I was talking to her, I guess, around the idea of the World Cup and how, it could be a really good opportunity in terms of women and girls football, and a PhD. So, and she was like, it is on the Women's World Cup and the legacy of it. And she was like, I sort of, you straight away, like, you need to apply. So, that's sort of how it came. So obviously I went through the process, applied, and it took a long time to get to the, the processes they go through, get to the end result. But, and then, have just been absolutely stoked to have gotten it and be able to do a PhD on something that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then I know that there's a lot about legacy, and the word is a key. It is a key word of this tournament.
It really is.
What does it mean to you? What does legacy mean to you in terms of, this tournament and what goes on afterwards?
I think it's, like you said, it is, it's thrown around here, there and everywhere. And I think it's like to the point where I don't know if we spoke about this, or it's something I've said to a few friends. If you've seen, I think it's How I Met Your Mother. Did we talk about this? Where there's a scene where I think it's, I don't know, better say, was it Friends? I think it's How I Met Your Mother. Anyway, he's like, bowl. And they say bowl so many times that it just doesn't recognize as a word in your brain. And that's kind of like what legacy's gotten to, I think, in a way. Like, I'm like, everyone says it to the point where I'm like, do you know what it means? Like, it's massive. Like, to me, it's huge. And I think, in order for I guess what it means to me is just really hoping that the tournament will leave, I guess, a change for the greater in terms of participation for women and girls, and all the other pillars. But for me personally, what I'm really passionate about is that participation piece and getting more women and girls into the game and enjoying the game and having a really great experience.
Why is participation such a point for you?
I think, I guess through my personal sort of experiences and my personal sort of drive around it is, like I spoke about earlier, how I grew up and had such a great experience. I want everyone to have, that thought, first of all, but also the opportunity to be able to play and have such like the experience that I did, which has been overwhelmingly positive my whole life. So I really want that. But also, I guess, as we know, the many, many benefits that sport and physical activity can bring into our lives, whether it's social connection or like mental health, physical capacity. It just brings so many things into your life that you can benefit from. So I think, I guess personally, that's why I am so passionate about participation. And also obviously through that sort of translates into my work at Football Victoria as well, and getting more women more active through football as well. And, I think if that leads to them thriving and striving and becoming material, that's amazing. I think if they're, happy playing socially and gaining all of those benefits that sport provides and football provides, that's, I'm so happy at the end of the day.
Yeah, awesome. And then we have our final question, which I've asked every single guest I've had on.
Yeah.
But where do you see women's football going in 5 years, in 10 years, and then well into the future?
Yeah. I mean, there's two sides of my brain that are sort of going off at the moment. One, I would just love to see, I would just love to see it. I would love to see us get to 50-50 as per the goal at FE and F Football Australia as well, to see, more women in the game across all different aspects. And as you've seen, like, we haven't had that many World Cups compared to the men's. I think it was 94, was it the first one? Was it earlier? Yeah. Anyway, but not that many. Yeah. And just to see how much it's grown in such a short amount of time, it's really exciting. So in terms of, I guess, the standard of the game, I'm really excited to see that, but also in terms of, gender equity and seeing more women in the game and what it can provide. I want to see it boom. Which brings me to the second part of my brain as well, which I think we spoke about last week, which one of my supervisors, Fiona McLaughlin, I'm also supervised by Brent McDonald, and they're amazing. Side note, but Fiona McLaughlin's got a really good piece, and a lot of her work's around what she calls boom time. In terms of, and she's got this really interesting piece where she's looked at women's sport and the media and the discourse around it over the last, I don't know if it was a century or the last good number of decades. And, sort of noticing, I guess, this reoccurring wording around this boom time for women's sport, and we've made it each decade. So that's something I guess that I'm becoming more aware of, and something I guess that's sort of growing in my brain is not a skepticism, but just sort of an awareness around, I'm hoping that isn't the case, but that's just something that's there as well, that I'm like, have we made it? Like, even though the discourse is saying that we have, it's if it's this recurring thing. So I guess there's two parts to it.
Perfect. Well, that's everything. Yeah. Thank you so much for hopping on.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me.
It's been a great chat. Yeah. I love, as I sort of told you, as much as my uni days are done, I do love learning about people who do undertake PhDs in research.
Yeah, you should do
a
one.
Whole other level. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But it is a whole other level of dedication, but also it's just so interesting learning about things, because everyone's always really passionate about the research projects that they undertake. So thank you for coming on and sharing a little bit about that, and a little bit about your work.
Oh, good.
And who's your final tip to win the whole thing?
I don't know. After watching Germany, I mean, it was against Morocco. Watching Germany on Monday, they're up there. Like, they definitely cemented in my brain that they are number 2 for a reason. So I wouldn't mind seeing them win. I mean, I would love to see the Tillies win. Yeah. But yeah. What about you?
That's a given. That's a given.
Yeah.
Oh, I think for me it's going to be the Lionesses, I think.
Yeah, I like that.
I watched them win the Euros. That's now my passion.
Yeah.
After the Tillies.
Yeah, Tillies and Lionesses.
But we're recording this on the 26th of July, so we'll see how we go by the end of it. We've got a little while to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. But thank you again so much.
No worries.